again, welcome to Reframe. This is a bi-weekly learning series that we're running for consultancy and agency folks, particularly, to actually make sure that the conversations around transformation, ways of working in AI is not talked about in abstract. We're bringing people who are doing the work in terms of how they're rethinking client engagement and delivery, and the value that gets built by advisory firms, and we asked them to show it and not just talk about it. And today's session is going to be about that. It's super practical, and I'm very excited to have the pleasure and the honor of introducing who's joining us today as a speaker. His session really sits right at the heart of what a lot of innovation firms do. So most firms are still, or the conversations we're actually seeing are still treating AI as a bolt-on. But so they finish the discovery, they ask AI to synthesize, so on and so forth. But it's not necessarily as much of the part of the workflow, or it's not as native and built in. And that's what Todd is actually going to be sharing with us today. He's going to take us through the full innovation cycle from identifying the problem all the way down to forming solutions and validating them. And he's really weaved in AI throughout that journey. He has a lot to his credit. He actually was the director of, let me just also refer back to my notes because that's usually helpful. So he's the founder of Writing, an AI native venture studio. And before going independent, he spent nearly a decade leading design thinking strategy at Bose. And he's actually contributed to two Time Magazine Inventions of the Year. He did share earlier that he has a team to credit for that, but I think he can also say that he was part of that work. He worked at the edge of human factors and system designs throughout his entire career, and he really breathes innovation day in, day out. And with the right thing, he's founded his own practice in such a way that innovation work couldn't necessarily just exist without AI. And today he's going to be sharing his framework and actually give a coded preview of how he's working with clients, and hopefully you'll get some inspiration from what he'll be sharing with us today. Todd, over to you.
Thank you, Jessica. That was a really nice introduction. I'm honored to be here. I'm such a huge fan of Miro and a big part of the community for a long time. I've been using it since I think I mentioned to you right as about COVID hit, and we said maybe we should try this Miro thing, right? And I've used it essentially all day, every day since. So anyway, we'll get right into this, and I want to make this as engaging as possible for you all, as helpful as possible, as entertaining as possible. So we'll make it interactive where we can. As Jessica said, my name is Todd Reily. I'm the founder of Writing, an AI native innovation studio, really focused on what I think of as meaningful innovation. So I'm going to share my screen here. We'll be presenting right from Miro. Get that guy out of there. Okay. We good? Yeah? Okay. So let's get to it. We want to start with the most basic brainstorm prompt, right? The how might we? And I think you're all probably very familiar with this. You get a bunch of folks in a room, in person, remote, maybe a Miro board, and ask people to come up with ideas, right? You might say, be as creative as you want, right? Blue sky, whatever you can come up with, right? And I think there are a lot of behaviors that typically play out in these environments. You get some familiar ideas, you get some that might be wacky and bold and everybody laughs and all that. And then those things kind of blend away. And through this sort of theater of brainstorming, usually constrained to, a couple hours in an afternoon, through no fault of your team, you end up with a sort of type of idea. There's a type of creativity that comes out of this. And it's not to the lack of ability or creativity of your team. It's sort of the human nature of these things that they end up leading to these. Why did my slides not advance? That's fine. We'll use this. Familiar, safe, likely, things that are just on the top of their minds, consensus driven. You do all the sort of dot voting, good ideas, right? And that's fine. Again, it's this sort of baseline level of good, but most likely, right, your team is not looking for good ideas, right? You're looking for breakthrough ideas. You're looking for the right ideas for you. So you often left unsatisfied, and this sort of theater, this excitement of the brainstorm kind of dies off, and then you sort of fall back to your usual plans, and then things don't really break through, right? So a lot of times what people are looking for is something much better. Where I'm coming from, just to ground you all, Jessica mentioned human factors and system design from Tufts and MIT. Had the great pleasure of leading experience design and design research at a couple startups, one in the smart glasses space and the other one in social robots, back in 2012 and 2015. So really early days of that stuff. And then built the visioneering team at Bose that was sort of responsible for all early stage concepting and concept validation, really from driving the long-term vision within the categories to bringing things to the doorstep of product development. Our sort of proudest achievement from that work was the ultra open earbuds that sparked a pretty large open earbud market now. And then, from working in these spaces, you just sort of naturally learn a lot about how to deal in ambiguity, how to work in spaces where there are no rules. And I thought, with the new possibilities of AI, they unlock the ability to work in new ways. And that's what I'm going to be talking about here. And I wanted to bring that out so I can have more of an impact and work with more folks to do that, which is why I launched this Right Thing studio earlier this year. What I want to talk through today is the journey through these three stages, from finding the right problem to generating breakthrough ideas that get beyond that sort of first level of creativity, to then validating those ideas at speed and scale and depth. Traditionally, that's a tension that is hard to resolve. Traditionally, in sort of design thinking type work, you can test with a dozen people where you get really rich information, but you're not getting the scale, and typically your stakeholders are unsatisfied with that level of scale. Or you can run a million surveys, but you're not getting depth. You're not understanding why people chose A over B. You just know that 80% of people chose A over B, right? So it's now possible to kind of get both. And underneath that is the fact that humans and AI, like there are things that AI unlocks now in these spaces, and there's still very, very much a strong role for AI for humans throughout this whole process. Human understanding, human creativity, human judgment. So it's this real symbiotic relationship that I'm learning through this work about what is possible with AI and then where the limitations are. And I'm going to talk through all those examples. And that's the stuff I think I'm really excited about at this point is AI enables completely new things, but also it can't do everything. So that's what's pretty exciting here. So let's get into what that looks like. But first, what I'd like to do is just get a pulse from the room at where people see the biggest issue across those three stages. So if you don't mind, follow this QR code, and we're going to do a quick vote on where you see your biggest innovation challenge, whether it is finding the right problem, generating the right solution, or validating at speed, scale, and depth. And I'll give everybody a moment to kind of let those play out. Interesting. Definitely getting a strong pull on validation, which is great. I think that's one of the ones that is the one I'm most excited about that feels completely new right now is what's possible with validation. Now we
Is
find
this
the right
also
problem.
what you're normally seeing with the companies you consult with? Is this like a representative spread?
Yeah, it probably is. It probably is. I think it's funny that third one, the validating at speed and scale. What I often find is teams just don't do that. I think they don't realize how easy it can be to learn. And you often I'm working with founders and sort of smaller stage startup type environments, and it's amazing that they could just be going on, you're going on a hunch. You're going on, and there might be evidence behind what you're going after, but I think a lot of times people believe that their answers might not be, that their questions might not be answerable, and they actually are. If you're sort of smart about how you experiment, and it's never been easier to learn. So it's absolutely something that, well, I'll get into it on how easy it is to do these days. So it's very exciting. Awesome. So that gives us a pretty good pulse, I think. Especially it's finding the right problem and then validating at speed and scale, which is great. I'm going to give lots of examples of both, including the one in the middle too, on the generating ideas. So let's move forward. Let's start at stage one, finding the right problem, right? It really all begins with this. I think innovation is this step is often overlooked, is getting really clear about the problem you're trying to solve, trying to find a problem that is truly meaningful, meaningfully unmet, one that you're anticipating about the future. What I want to do for today, unfortunately, I can't share some of the work I've been doing with the partners I'm working with, but I want to give you an example of one that's like representative. So let's say this notional company you're working with really believes in the power of deep focus, right? They want to help people be more productive in their work, in their studies, kind of recognizing it feels like people are distracted and they want to help. So with that in mind, something, and this is a thing that AI can augment, but this is really the job of the human. With the team we had at Bose, we had an incredible ethnographic team. They would go out, we went out into homes, hundreds of homes, observing people, using speakers, using wearables, um, just getting out in the world. But you don't have to have a big world-class ethnographic team to do that. You can go out as a two-person startup and observe trends, observe behavior, observe attitudes, study psychology, understand why people do the things they do. And one of my biggest takeaways from this is I just think of as embracing the mess. It's embracing the messiness of life. And the fact that, when you're thinking about in this particular case of deep work, no one's desk is perfect and clean. No one has some perfect setup. Their schedule's a mess. They're distracted. They're trying to get work done at home, but the dog's barking and there's leaf blowers running at the neighbor's house, and the kids are in and out and not cleaning up their stuff. And it's just life is really messy, and often that's where the opportunities lie. It's within that mess. Right. And that's where I think you're going to go find your problems, most interestingly. And that's really, those are things that an LLM is not going to have for you because LLMs are based on existing knowledge and information. What you're looking for is sort of anticipated unmet needs that exist within the messiness of daily life. So let's say this team then comes back. They've observed some problems and they now have some hypotheses. And what I do typically with the teams is really work on articulating those clear hypotheses about what they believe, right? So in this particular case, let's say you have these three. Failed discipline. People have the willpower and habits and routines. They have the knowledge. They've seen it on Instagram and TikTok. They know what they're supposed to do. They just can't do it. They can't do it on their own because there's just so many outside forces competing with it. The second hypothesis, and we tease these apart, is that people would actually pay to solve that problem, right? That they'd spend real money on tools, methods, services that can help them maintain their focus. And then last, that this is as much about the environment changing around them as it is about their individual behavior. So those might be three beliefs that the team has. What we then do is we take that into what I call a belief session. The belief session is something I would facilitate with the team. We get in a room together, we get on a Miro board, we'd lay it out pretty similar to this, where you have this spectrum from, I don't believe this is true at all, to this is fact. And we get them to vote on this, and everybody drags their dots to where they go, and we have discussion boxes as well on there. What I'm trying to do with this methodology is not make sure that everyone's perfectly on the same page. In fact, it's a really bad sign if you have a corporate team and everyone's kind of nodding their heads and in agreement because they probably don't agree. What you want is to surface those differing agreements and those differing positions and then foster a discussion around that. And it's really healthy if there are lots of different views and discussions. And really the value from this isn't the votes, it's the sort of reflecting on it and the debate that happens afterwards. So you might have something like this where, everyone's sort of leaning true on the failed discipline, pay for focus. They might be leaning more false. They're like, yeah, I think it's real, but I don't think people pay for it. And then the environmental hypothesis is a little more split. So you have this very lively conversation around it. And now you understand where your team's at, and it helps you understand where you need to learn, right? Where do we have the highest level of uncertainty? And we also often vote on impact of each of these, right? How big of a deal is it if this is false, right? So after that session, well, you know what? I want you all to feel what this feels like. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do another vote. This time, I want you to vote on the first one, that people typically can't achieve deep focus through discipline alone. They need tools to do it. And I want you to kind of see what this feels like when everyone kind of has, well, we'll see how much people agree. And this is one of my favorite things in this process. And again, this is all a very human part of the process. We'll be getting into a lot more of the AI tools in a minute, but this almost mediation, or we joke about it feeling like therapy. We would do this all the time at Bose. Getting folks in the room and getting to them to really expose how they feel deeply about what are they, where they have conviction and not is just tends to be pretty fascinating. So you see this very wide spread kind of playing out here, right? And that's good. It's healthy. I mean, it tells you that you need to learn, and it tells you that with differing views, when you think about it, for the folks that are on the lower ratings in a typical company, you might just go run with a product or feature in that area. But for the folks that don't believe in it, they're not going to give their best work towards that because they don't believe it to be true. And you see that happening in companies all the time. And I think it's much better off to go out and get information and actually learn from that. So with that in mind, you get a sense of the spread that tends to play out in these. The group seems to be aligning on that kind of 4, seems like the strongest one. What we then do is we say, okay, let's go learn, right? Traditionally, this might be surveys. It might be interviews with a dozen people or something like that. What we can do now with AI, and this is one of the things I'm so excited about, is build virtual researchers using a Claude Code or similar. What we do is design a test protocol. We then build a virtual researcher to run a 5 to 7 minute long interview with target customers. We then send out emails to them where they can, where participants engage in a short conversation. You can design these things in such a way they're actually acting as a very experienced veteran interviewer that can probe at questions and really find patterns and find tensions in the responses from the user. This does not feel like a survey. It feels like a live conversation. And we'll send these out and we'll run tests with, I think the last one we did at 185 interviews in about 4 days we ran. And I'll just give you a sample of what that looks like. And of course, now this is not playing here.
Might be good to jump out of presentation just
Yeah.
to. Glad we tested that out earlier.
No, we tested it and it worked
Yeah.
and it didn't work. Yeah.
Sorry, that's
Okay. There we go.
there, lovely.
Oh, good. We're fine. Let's see how we do here.
Cool.
There it is. Okay. And I sped it up just for the sake of time, but you can see is this interviewer has this very dynamic, adaptive conversation that responds to the kinds of things that the people are saying. And having read through now hundreds and hundreds of these transcripts from different studies we've run, the way that people are engaging with these is really, really natural. And the beauty is because they can do it, it's only about 5 minutes. They can do it on their own time. We're playing with voice as well as text. People are actually, like I said, engaging in a nice way. And what comes from this is this really rich level of information that I'm blown away by, frankly. And you'll learn the nuances of why people said what they did and the patterns that come out that you kind of only get at that level of scale. So this idea of qualitative insights at scale is really something that's totally new. So you might get something that kind of looks like this. You might have 114 participants, the majority AI led. I also bring in about a dozen live interviews as well that I'll conduct just to make sure we're catching everything in the patterns and getting just that human lens that kind of only comes from observing people talking about these things. I often find it's sort of nonverbal cues and sentiment that doesn't come through in the AI tests. And you might see something like, oh, 78% of people believe that discipline and good habits no longer get them to deep focus, and that 2 and 3 would pay for a tool. And maybe you see this clear trend towards outside forces having a greater impact than internal forces, and people feeling like they're kind of pretending that they could do this and really they can't. So at this point, maybe you've surfaced that this problem is real. And it's something that you believe people will pay for. And now you have conviction. Now you bring that back to the team and you have that clarity. And there's no longer debates and ambiguity and people who maybe aren't giving their most into a project because they don't totally believe in it, right? Now you're working with real information. Let me go back into my presentation mode here. And so next I want to talk about finding your idea. So you have a clear job to be done. You have a clear problem to solve. You now believe in it. You have conviction in it, right? I mean, it's really a huge de-risking factor is finding that right problem, right? So now you want to go after your idea. Actually, I'm going to come out of presentation mode again on this one because this is another fun part here. So another thing that's completely new, and this is also partly to the benefit of Miro and what's possible combined with AI. A little bit on the approach we take. We take this much more systematic approach to ideation. Instead of just coming up with ideas, sorry for the dog barking. Instead of just coming up with ideas, writing them on sticky notes and things like that, we have this more systematic approach. What we do is we anchor the team in that gold bar at the top, right? This is the clear why. This is the problem that we're going after, right? We then delay ideation. And by delay ideation, what I mean is we're not asking the team to come up with solutions yet. We're asking them to come up with strategies, right? How we might solve that problem. So for example, and that's what this column on the left is. This is the buy, this is the how, this is the strategy, right? We're trying to generate as many strategies as we can. So the team says, by blocking outside noises. Naturally, being a Bose guy, I'm going to jump to that. But that's kind of a good, obvious solution, right? And that's where a lot of teams might just go right away. Let's build a better noise canceling headphone. And that's great. You might want to do that. You might also want, by focus enhancing soundscapes, you might say, okay, focus enhancing sound might be a strategy, right? So adding sound, right, to help people focus. And maybe a third one might be by smart home integration. You might say, oh, I feel like we should integrate with the home and lighting and temperature to kind of see, what that might lead to. Now, again, this is typically how we work with the team. This might play out over the course of facilitated sessions or days of asynchronous work to get them to come up with all the possible strategies. Typically, we're pushing for 12, 14, 15 strategies. As you get beyond those initial few, that's where things start to get unlocked in a really meaningful way. Now, that's what we can do with human teams. Now, something I've started playing with, we've been using with teams that I'm very excited about is where you can bring in AI into this. So we built this vibe coded tool that is intentionally sort of built with this protocol, this ideation approach we call two by using, built into it. So now what I can do is I can say, okay, the team has kind of come up with all the strategies we can. Let's say that'd be kind of sad if we can only come up with 3, but let's just say we only came up with 3. I can then click expand strategies. And now the AI has come up with a bunch more ways. And I capped it at 8 just because we have a limited time here and I don't want to get too deep. But now you see a bunch of others come up, right? By gamifying sustained attention, by designing micro commitment cycles, by removing decision friction. And these are intended to be sort of strategic approaches and almost written in an abstract enough way that they trigger creative thinking from the team. So really what we're trying to do is find this sweet spot where you're not outsourcing creativity to AI. Instead, you're using AI to help unlock and reframe how the team is thinking, right? And getting it to trigger sort of new views from the human team, right? So now you see some of these are popping up. Now the team's going to have a brainstorm against these, right? This is, like I said, the tactics. So using, just again, use the obvious ones, noise canceling headphones or earbuds, fine, very obvious one. You're like, well, how else might we do that? Well, again, we can use the AI for this. We could fill out this board as best we can on our own as a human team. You also then can ask it to fill out the tactics. And on this row, it might come up with some other ideas, like the sound wall, ambient masking layer neutralizes distracting noise, or quarantine, physical barriers seal off external interruptions. Maybe you're going to build pods in your home. And again, this is not giving too much information so that human team can go, okay, that's interesting. It just puts you in a new mindset. So getting you to continually get out of your own head and your own biases and your own patterns to get you thinking in new ways. And it's this sort of dance between human and AI. And if this goes right, when it goes right, it's kind of unclear where one starts and the other one ends and the other one begins, which is the thing I actually am excited about with this. So just the same, you could go through all these and fill out as many of these rows as you want. And in a typical team, what we're pushing for, I mentioned that kind of 12 to 14 strategies. For each one of those, I want 8 to 12, 14 ideas that leverage each of those strategies to meet that goal. So now what you're doing, instead of just randomly coming up with ideas in the room and throwing them on sticky notes, what you're instead doing is mapping out the entire solution space systematically, rigorously, to the point where you would get to 100 ideas, 100 ways to solve the problem. You have a much richer understanding of what that solution space looks like. So we have a whole bunch of ideas now on the board, all organized in different ways. And the team might say, okay, we found these dozen to be interesting. I'm usually trying to get to 8 to 12. It gives us a nice diversity of ideas. Just for sake of simplicity for today, I just grabbed 3. Let's say, for example, you have 3 that are kind of tackling this from 3 different approaches. This anchor concept would be to help people reach deep focus by tactile interaction. So maybe this is a physical object that allows you to just interact with it, and it puts you in a focus mode, blocks all your notifications, plays your focus soundscape, whatever it might be. Cocoon might be more of a smart wearable that reads your brain and builds a shield around it, right? Using biometric signals, maybe it's an EEG sensor along those lines, and modulates sound and light and temperature to keep you in focus. And then score might be something where the strategy is more about a sound and task integration. So your to-do list and your soundtrack, your to-do list and your sound become fully intertwined to really help you focus. So it's coming at it from all different directions: products, experiences, wearables, desktop devices. Again, we'd have dozens and dozens. We would test 8 to 12. One of the key things with this, and this is where Miro is extremely valuable, when we used to just have physical rooms that we would get together in, the brainstorm was limited to that special 1 hour, right? The 2 hours, whatever it might be. When you work in a digital whiteboard, the beauty of that sort of persistent board is we would run the session to get the creative process started, but then you give teams days, typically 1 to 3 weeks, depending on the project, to go and build out those ideas on their own. And we do that because not everybody thrives in that brainstorm session. I'm very comfortable in it. I enjoy it. I love it. The energy is great. But also there's an introverted side of me too. And for a lot of people, they don't feel comfortable. They don't do their best thinking. They're not creative in those kind of environments. They need that kind of dark morning or that late night, maybe sitting with a coffee or headphones on and just putting down their thoughts very clearly, very independently. You're going to get much cleaner, independent thinking during those moments than you will in the room when there are a lot of those weird social forces at play. So we're really trying to foster that independent thinking, heavily cross-functional teams we would work with to get those ideas on the board, articulate them in a clear way. We then get back together and have these cross-functional sessions where the team builds on each other. They build on each other's ideas. And you're really, again, having that like back and forth between independent and cross-functional, real time and asynchronous, and kind of coming at it from every different direction. Again, I chose 3 here, and these are just, notional, silly examples, but typically we're kind of trying to get ourselves to 12. So let's say, for example, now the team's like, okay, that anchor idea is interesting, but we want to see, well, there's something we like about it, but we're not sure exactly what. So here's where I built this other tool. This is what I think of as an idea riffing tool. When you think of these 2 dimensions of familiarity and complexity. Familiarity from very familiar, known types of concepts to making it more unique. And then the x-axis is complexity, right? Easier, safe, near-term things we might do with this to more ambitious and risky. And you give it an idea at the center, whatever you want it to be. And then I launch my tool here. Click on this, and I have it riff on that idea. Now, I programmed it to use these two axes, but it could be in any direction, whatever might make sense for your team. Maybe it pushes towards different customer personas. Maybe it pushes towards more fun versus more work oriented. But now you see it gave you 8 different variants on that same anchor idea, right? So from the more known, easier, safer, it's this do not disturb sign that teams rotate on their desks, right? Just a very simple open office desk product to something way in the upper right that's more of this, what is this sort of weighted token, yeah, more of a digital token type thing, or biometric linked device. So just again, getting the team to think about an idea from every possible direction. And again, using this sort of fluid dance between AI and human in that creative process, using the AI to help trigger new thinking, but then the human judgment to decide what direction to push in. So moving on, I'll go back in presentation mode. You might then update your anchor idea, and now you have your concepts. And another way we might do this often is creating mock product pages, right? Verge headlines, TechCrunch articles, things like that to go take into testing. Really push for not narrowing in too quickly, keeping this at 8 to 12 ideas to take into testing, because those ideas oftentimes, the ones that push the boundaries are the ones you end up learning the most about. So you're really trying to probe as much as possible. So now you have your ideas. You have 8 to 12 ideas they're going to take into testing, and you're not sure where to go next, right? You could debate and all that, but then obviously just having the ideas is not enough. You need conviction, as we heard about up in the front, that the group here feels that this is one of the biggest challenges, right? Proving out that it's the right idea, getting that evidence that makes you confident that it's worth going after. So with this, just for fun, how about we vote on which of those 3 ideas are the ones that might be most exciting to go after? I just want to see where people land on this. And I wish I could share some of the real studies that
Yeah.
we're
Do
doing.
you have a personal preference here or too biased? How close is this to the real life case, Todd?
Oh, no, not in this one. It's a little bit off, but yeah,
Okay. Fair. Ooh.
cool.
Well, you got your answer there.
I do have a personal bias for the cocoon one. I do love that kind of idea. I've used it myself.
Mm.
Um, but really often it's similar to, as I mentioned before, that those belief sessions. I love doing these kinds of exercises with teams because it's not where the voting lands, it's the rationale, it's the discussion, it's sort of what comes out of that, right? Why people chose what they chose. And it's often the sort of question behind the question that I think ends up being the most interesting thing. So cool. Well, let's move on. I'll show you another test. Again, we'd go back out in the field, and this is where we run the concept tests. And again, we have the same problem, but that's not an issue. We'll deal with it. We would then run another concept test where we would have a virtual researcher who brings these concepts to participants and has a conversation about them. And there's a lot of methodologies these days of running tests on, say, Instagram, right? You can put fake ads and see what people click on and all of that. And those are wonderful. I think that's a very cool technique. What I love with this technique is how it augments that. You can get such good information by probing people, not just on what they picked, but why they picked it. And I'm working with a startup right now that's developing a new hardware concept, and we put a dozen different concept designs in front of them and had these really rich conversations with people about design and why they chose what they chose, and the rationale that people gave was so interesting. And it ended up completely redirecting the product definition of what the team was going after, because they realized that while the product they were going after was directionally right, the design, depending on which form they chose, there were little cues in the design that were going to send people completely in one direction versus another. Right? Just to be specific, it was sort of a bedroom lamp speaker bedside kind of concept, and the really what we learned through that was people didn't want technology in the bedroom. They didn't want anything that signaled technology in the bedroom. They wanted something that looked like decor. And you kind of only learn that level of sort of depth and nuance through rich conversations. When we can do it at scale, they have real conviction. So you can talk to, 120 people. So just to give a sense of the kinds of stuff, right? You're getting this rich information. You might learn that of 100 people, 61% chose the anchor concept, and that maybe that you get the sort of surprise anecdote that people realized it wasn't about seeing their own status. It was about sharing your status with others so that they're aware, right? That it solves both a sender problem and a receiver problem. And the people don't need help focusing. They need your team to know that you are trying to focus, right? And those kinds of insights might come out from this sort of research. It might direct you um, towards something completely different that you didn't expect, which is maybe the big thing here, is in this work, I've found, oftentimes, whether it's a startup or a bigger corporation, it's easy to talk yourself out of ideas they don't think will hit because of common knowledge, um, status quo thinking on that. And what I'm seeing a lot is people might use AI to ask if things are a good idea. And by nature, LLMs are based on existing information. So they're going to lean into some of that same status quo information. They're going to come up with some of those same sort of near-term familiar ideas, right? It falls into the same thinking that a group falls into, essentially. And what I'm getting at with this is by testing, by probing, by really pushing for diversity in this, by bringing in a better framework in the creative process, you can unlock new opportunities and new openings, and you can test things that maybe you wouldn't have considered before, and you end up surprised in what you learn. So I've talked at length about the beauty of deep insights at scale. I think that's one of the big unlocks for me and what AI enables is that speed and scale and depth, augmenting your creative process, right? And the speed isn't about just efficiency, right? Innovation isn't about efficiency. It's about finding the right thing. So when you can learn quickly, what it just means is that you can try more things. You could try stranger things. You could try bolder things. You just get more turns at bat. You can learn once and then iterate and go, okay, what if we tried this and try something else? Because that kind of work is very generative. Again, we went through this process, full journey from finding the right problem to generating breakthrough ideas to validating at speed and scale. It's a full arc. And we can do this full arc now in 3 to 4 weeks, 5 weeks most, work that would have taken 6 months or more before, right? Generating that many concepts, talking with hundreds of users, right? That used to take incredible amount of time and resources in order to do that, and doesn't anymore. So I just want to wrap up on the idea that this is all meant to be. The way I look at AI is it's meant to serve us, right? I feel really strongly, kind of going way back and geeking out on history of computing and JCR Licklider and Douglas Engelbart and this notion of augmented intelligence, and that the way I look at AI is it's meant to serve humans and get to this very symbiotic relationship with computers. And that's what I'm so excited about is what's possible now in the innovation process, so that they can augment us. It's not an either or between human and AI. It's how do we get the most out of AI while still retaining what's special about humans in this process? Understanding and creativity and judgment and empathy and all these things, collaboration, and all of that is still incredibly, incredibly valuable, right? The answer is both. So, your time is limited, your resources limited within your team or at your clients. So figuring out what is the right thing to go do is as important as ever. So that's why I created Right Thing, Venture Studio for meaningful innovation. Again, starting from this idea of being AI native and still applying those same principles of human-centered innovation to see where that goes. And it's really been a great journey, and I'd love for others to join in on that. So if you're interested in working together or have clients that want to, please reach out. I very much welcome the conversation to go explore what's next. And I very much thank you for your time today. I welcome any questions folks might have. You can reach out to me on my website. There's more information, or just hit me up, and happy to chat. Thank you. I will stop sharing.
Not to sound like a total cheerleader, but that was amazing, honestly. Like
Thank you,
I
Jessica.
feel really comforting. I mean, I know a lot of people here probably have their own takeaways, but the way you sort of spoke about your relationship with AI and how you verbalized how you work with it, how you collaborate with it. It sounds almost poetic and comforting because it really like the work like how what you showed with to us, right? The foundations are the same in terms of how you approach innovation, like from problem solving, finding the right solutions and validating them. But it's super clear how you've used the tool to serve you to sort of make sure that the work can scale faster and better and that it really just augments what is natively great about humans, like creativity, judgment, so on and so forth. So lots of things to mull over. And yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. Really, really happy.
You're
For
very welcome. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this, Jessica. Very much.
I'm glad. I'm glad. We also have some questions actually. I think there were guys, feel free to drop questions in chat, but I'll take the ones which came in first. There's definitely interest around how you used it in terms of validation and the quality research that went in. So uh, maybe a couple of questions around that is one, can you share more about how you've set up the guardrails for doing the almost like the synthetic validation part? And also, how are you recruiting for the larger number of qual interviews that the AI can run?
So typically, I guess I'll answer the second part first. What we do is I build out these studies and I'll do it with the team. We decide on the goals. I then design how I want this interviewer to behave, really based on years of doing this kind of work. How do we get the most out of a 5-minute conversation to really understand um, people's perspectives? Those studies are intentionally 5 to 7 minutes because we're really trying to push the boundaries of what people are comfortable with interacting with an AI through text in particular. Um, so we try to put guardrails around that, around the length of these and where it goes. And so it's very much a balance between being unscripted and dynamic, but also having rules and principles. So that researcher is behaving in a way that we've designed. It says, here are your goals. Here are the beliefs of the team. Don't reveal these beliefs. Take the person through a conversation that's about 5 minutes long, hit on these questions, probe on this 1 or 2 times. If you don't get a good answer, just move forward. So the conversation is very much constrained, but dynamic within those constraints so that it feels human, but also feels focused at the same time. In terms of recruiting, we typically have a persona that we're looking for. There's some great services out there, a service called Prolific that a lot of universities use for recruiting people, and you pay something between $1 to $3 per participant, so it's totally worth it. But we also use Reddit and LinkedIn, and we did a study recently on sleep habits. I referenced that one, and we used different Reddit forums around where people are exploring different methodologies and solutions for trying to help with their sleep. And we got a ton of people just through that. So, and friends and family, whatever it might be. So we get a bit scrappy. It depends on the project. But looking for people for 5 to 7 minutes of their time, not always compensated. People are actually great and fine with interacting with that, and that hasn't been an issue at all. Yeah.
Maybe quick follow-up to that. Were there any instances where it's kind of gone a bit awry or wrong, and how did you iterate on it in the process?
Boy, not yet.
Because it sounds good and dandy, but in
Yeah.
practical,
Yeah,
how
no,
do
we
we know
haven't
the
had issues with
limits?
that. I mean, the only issue is we'll burn through a lot of tokens, so sometimes we'll like hit the
Okay,
wall and have to shut it down for a couple days. But that's the biggest issue. It hasn't gone off the rails in terms of the conversation or anything like that. We tested enough. So what
that's
we often
amazing.
do is with the partner I'm working with, I'll have them tested internally, so we get lots of people using it. And it's these little 5-minute iterations, and I'll use it a ton. And so yeah, that hasn't been an issue too much yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy about that right now. But if
But it's wild. I
anything,
mean, we've probably interviewed in the last
I
five
mean, you
months of
mentioned in
running
the
these studies.
hundreds, which sounds insane.
I mean, per study, it's not like 100 at least.
Mm.
So, I mean, probably at this point, talk to thousands of people. And yeah, it goes incredibly well. And the
Yeah.
information we get has been great. And as I mentioned, if we don't have to compensate, people are open to it. So it hasn't been an issue at all. And so you think about how easy it is now to engage with your customers and learn and understand them
Yeah.
better. I mean, why wouldn't you, right? Like, why wouldn't you try to engage with your customers to understand them better? Because it might reveal opportunities that you never expected, right?
Definitely. And I guess to your point earlier as well, just making sure that you augment that with actually talking to people and like other types of research
Yeah, I
would be
still believe
great.
in that. Yeah.
Yeah. Next question from Katya. So how many human people do you have in a process like this, except the interview partners, to steer and curate the AI output?
How many people created the interview or the virtual researcher?
Katya, you mind sharing a bit more context with your I can see her nodding. So feel free to just unmute and
Yeah, I mean, from the start of the ideation until the final 3 to 5 ideas.
Hmm.
There are a lot of interactions which you have to oversee and curate, perhaps or
Hmm.
not. I'm thinking about, in theory, you could do it alone with AI, but maybe you have some more people with
Hmm.
different functions in it.
I'm so glad you asked this, Katya. Yes, you could do this alone. I feel very strongly in the value of diverse teams in that creative process. In fact, that methodology, because it has that one board, and typically in Miro, it's much, much bigger. uh, we break things out by the why, the how, and the what. We do that for a reason because it gives everyone this common ground. So now you have people like consumer researchers, insights folks, might be really focused on the human needs and understanding those. And then you might have engineers who are less knowledgeable of that, but fully understand the technology and what's possible. And they can play in that spot on the right of solutions and what's possible. So, in an ideal situation, what I'm trying to do is bring together these super diverse teams that come in from all different perspectives. And it could be strategy and marketing and design and engineering, where they're kind of all bringing their own piece. And I might have half of a really good idea, and you have the other half of that good idea. I'm trying to foster those people coming together. Not to mention, I talked about the in the room brainstorm versus the in-home independent thinking. Those are very different people that think creatively in those two different spaces, and I want to foster those connections as well. At Bose, I often had we had people on our team that might have been, fresh out of school, 22 years old, in a brainstorm with someone who literally invented noise cancellation 30 years ago, right? And I want their connection because their connection might be the most interesting thing, and oftentimes it was. So at Bose, a lot of times those projects would touch on 30, 40 people, and we could have these sessions because we could bring people into that Miro board mid-sprint and say, okay, these are the ideas we've been exploring. Help us strengthen these. And we would run this sort of strengthening session. I could have gotten into that today, where there were a whole bunch of ideas on the board. We run through and we set a timer, and it's 2 minutes per idea, and everyone has to write down their notes on how they would improve the idea. Not debating about it, not shooting it down, just say, how would you make this better? And everybody writes down their thoughts. And we go bang, 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 all the way through. And in a 2 hour session, we cover 60 ideas. And it's super fun. And it gets this like very diverse cross-functional interaction that goes on. And all the ideas get better from that. So now if you submitted an idea with your own independent time, you now see all the ways that the team might improve on. Um, but to answer your question, it depends. It depends who we're working with. More the better is the way I look at it. But with some of the partners I'm working with, it's been more startups. So it's typically less than 10 people, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
keep the
Great question.
questions coming, guys. Actually, while you were talking, maybe again, a bit of a follow-up. Because there's, as you mentioned, right, there are almost like principles that you want to maintain, rituals where you really like bring the team around when it comes to diversity of perspective, cross-functional collaboration, so on and so forth. throughout the entire innovation process or the cycle for you, which are the parts you're most precious about in terms of maintaining that this is going to be purely human, like no AI intervention required?
Ah, that's a hard question,
Sorry.
Jessica. Um, can I give you two? Can
Yeah,
you
of
give me
course. I
everything
mean,
time?
it's
Time
yeah.
first? Yeah. Finding the right problem. If we're really talking the search for innovation and seeing things before they happen and kind of anticipating where the world might be going.
Hmm.
I mentioned before about the limitations of AI kind of being based on today's information. I just, by nature, it only knows so much about where things might be going. So using human observation to see where things might go, I think that's something that is just it's the nature of LLMs. It's not where I think through human observations, seeing patterns, understanding culture, understanding behavior, behavioral psychology, I think you could start to pick up on where things might go. So finding that right problem to solve is
It's
something
just
that
at the horizon.
yeah, that I feel pretty strongly is really humans at the core, human understanding, and I talked about embracing the mess, right? Like humans are messy in the nicest way possible, right? Complex and interesting and irrational and do things that just conflict and don't make sense all the time. It's just the nature of humans, and I think that's the kind of thing that we can't outsource to machines. We have to be able to do that. And then I don't know. I still think in that creative process, it's making that leap. What I'm excited about is like, and this is where I'm kind of cheating at your answer, I guess, which is like AI augmenting that human leap, right?
Mhm.
And it's that sort of symbiotic relationship that I think is really interesting. So we need humans in that process to make those leaps. But I do think with a good framework and the tools, we can actually help ourselves make that leap by building these kinds of tools.
Makes
So
total
sorry to
sense.
cheat and give you two answers when you asked for
No,
one.
like, that wasn't cheating at all. Okay. We have two more questions, so this is going to be a speed round. From Dan, have you considered integrating synthetic audiences in your
Hmm.
validation process?
Yeah, actually, I've done quite a bit of that. I've played with some methodologies where we look at a bunch of ideas, and then quickly simulate how the market would feel about those, and testing with synthetic personas. And I think it's super valuable. I wouldn't have that be the only thing that you do. So we've done some of that, and in this sort of sprint process, we might have ideation in the morning, and then over lunch, basically simulate how the market might feel about it, and then come back and have a discussion about those insights and say, okay, based on that, should we narrow down our set? Because sometimes what I find is interesting with that approach is it doesn't necessarily represent how customers will feel, but it does often help you think about it where you go, oh yeah, that's probably right. That probably is how people will feel, right? So it's almost like the synthetic information with human judgment overlaid on top of it that I find really valuable and useful. Another thing we've done there and built into the tools is this idea of like an AR Shark Tank, where we have three different sort of Shark Tank personalities from, you kind of shape a couple personalities and tell them, debate about this idea. And similarly, I find it really interesting because you're teasing out LLMs have a bit of a generic personality. But if you say, I want you to be the skeptic, I want you to be the optimistic founder, and I want you both to debate about it. And often it kind of helps you think in new ways when you see those two, polarizing perspectives around your idea.
Almost like built-in thinking hats so for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hope that answered your question, Dan. And Heike, I promise I'll take your last question. But one from Lisa: with AI making it possible to proliferate lots of ideas quickly, do you have guidance on how to best whittle down to the best ideas without getting lost in rabbit holes?
For sure. I mean, as I mentioned, what the testing can do, it's so easy to learn now. We typically test, 8 to 12 concepts. You could do
Mm.
many rounds of those, right? So there's ways to winnow down. We have other kind of voting techniques that the team uses to narrow concepts down. We have this idea we call superlative voting. Instead of just dot voting on the things you like, we have superlatives around, best solution to a problem or best long-term idea, best short-term idea, kind of coming at it from different perspectives and get the team to vote. There's lots of ways to facilitate that process. Miro is great as a platform for that, of getting teams to get aligned and find the ideas that they want to go pursue and test. But ultimately, you can test a lot of ideas. So if your problem is you have too many ideas, like that's a good problem to have. There's lots of ways to solve that. Yeah.
And last question from Heike with 2 minutes in.
Thank you. This is a little bit philosophical, but I've been thinking about this quite a lot when training dialogical facilitators. You mentioned that finding the right problem. And my question is, whose problem is it if we collaborate? Can we have a shared general problem, or does everyone has their own problems? So it's question of subjectivity and objectivity. Is it possible to have a shared general right problem?
That is very philosophical in 1 minute. I think that's why I believe so strongly in engaging with customers in this process, because oftentimes you might have a situation where, let's say you and I are on the same team, and we might be debating about that problem. And really the reason we're debating is because my life experience is different than your life experience. And at the end of the day, it actually shouldn't matter which one of us is right. It's not about either one of us. It's about how, do the customers have that problem? And that's why I try to use what I'm excited about is with these methodologies, it's so much easier to get to objective evidence now, right? So now you can have a much more evidence-based conversation. And then you could talk about, does this problem scale to everyone and all of that? But I think it at least overcomes that subjective internal bias.
Thank you, I agree.
Thank you.
That rounds off right at the hour. For us, thank you so much, Todd, for sharing that and for actually addressing all the questions. I think you inspired not a lot of practical ones, but also even from Heike, a more philosophical question. This was such a great reframe, and I hope everyone took something valuable out of this. Before everyone leaves, I'm gonna drop some links in chat. So say hello to Todd, follow his journey with the right thing, and maybe share some questions. Say hi to him on LinkedIn. And for me, if you want to drop in and share what resonated, that's great. We're always on the lookout for people or voices to feature, as well as interesting topics that you'd want to know more about. So insights, not synthetic ones, really, really help. And if you want to explore what else we're doing for consultancies, there are also some links there. Thank you to everyone, and thanks, Todd. Hope to see you in the next one, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Really appreciate it. This is fun.
Appreciate it. Bye. Thank you.